Tonight on Free Minds TV, we'll be delving into the war on drugs and apparently now the war on yeast. We'll also be discussing a story about copyright law and a TSA agent who didn't really like having the tables turned on them. That plus a whole lot more coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
Thank you for tuning in to episode 27, season 6, or the 215th episode of Free Minds TV that has ever been recorded, or at least regular episode, I should say. With you, as always, is Toby.
And Nick.
And this is the show that challenges you, the viewer, to think outside the box. So let's get right into it. We've got a lot to discuss here, so let's skip all the fun intro stuff and just delve right into the war on drugs, or I guess let's start with the war on yeast, because this is really where it all begins, right,
yeah,
Nick? In the yeast.
Well, this doesn't really have to do with something we conventionally think about drugs, but it does have to do with one of the most popularly consumed drugs in American society, and that's alcohol. You need yeast to make alcohol. Basically, you ferment anything that has sugar or some kinds of starches, carbohydrates in there, breaks it down into bubbles like carbon dioxide, and booze, ethanol. So in Alaska, where many communities are dry, I think they're pointing out here that at last count there were 34 communities in Alaska that had voted to ban the possession, sale, importation, and manufacturing of alcohol. Well, in some of these 34 communities, they've also adopted provisions that ban the possession of yeast or pound quantities of sugar. So,
Isn't sugar sold by the pound?
well, sugar is sold by the pound.
A pound?
Here's where it is. State law says that local option towns that say basically towns with local alcohol prohibitions says that local option also makes it a misdemeanor offense to possess yeast and sugar in pound quantities with the intent to make alcohol. So that's the key part. How do you prove intent? And I mean, they're pointing out here, I think some of the police, the Alaska police here, are saying that they'll ask people questions like, you know, people will say they're baking bread, and they'll ask a question like, how much yeast do you use to make a loaf of bread? And if they say a cup, it's not right.
You don't need a full cup.
Maybe
they're making a lot of bread, Nick. You never know.
They are making lots of booze. Now, lots of people do have drinking problems in Alaska because it gets thick.
They do here in New Hampshire too, Nick. Maybe not as bad.
If you're living in an Inuit fishing village and it gets dark for 6 months of the year and there's no town to go into and you can't even stand to walk out of your house because it's so cold, what would you do, Toby?
Well, I guess I'd be forced to make my own because
you would drink, but you'd probably drink for 6 months until you die.
Well, I hope not. There's no town to go to, so I guess the only option would be to make your own, right? If there's no town to get to. Plus, it's illegal to buy in the town. I thought Prohibition was over. I guess there's a lot of places that are still dry.
It's not just Alaska here. There are
all over
many
the place.
counties and
down south. There's a lot of dry places, so there's a lot more moonshine going on.
Parts of Louisiana, I think parts of Tennessee, where they the county where they make Jack Daniels is dry. At least it was at the last time I checked.
Interesting.
You can make it there, but you can't actually drink Jack Daniels.
So some places, I mean, we talk all the time about how society in general, the government especially, has not learned its lesson about prohibition from prohibition. While alcohol is widely legal in the United States, apparently not in some places, and seems like a growing number of places, they definitely haven't learned their lesson when it comes to other drugs. I mean, alcohol drug, that's okay, but certain other drugs are not sanctioned, and they definitely didn't learn their lesson. Unfortunately, towns haven't either, and you run into the same exact problems with alcohol prohibition as you do with prohibition of all drugs, and that's having to do with the quality control number one. What happens when a batch of moonshine goes bad, Nick? How's that work out for the consumer?
Depending on how you produce it. Actually fermenting, like...
When it goes badly, though.
Once you get out of fermentation and you get into distilling it, you can make somebody blind or kill them. You'd have to do a few things wrong, but they point out in this article that a lot of the people they're dealing with aren't too bright, and they're making the alcohol. They're making the alcohol. It is dark, and they're making the alcohol, with what sounds like sugar, baker's yeast, which you can use, and just fruit juices and stuff like that. Like they're basically just taking juice and water and sugar, and which is not necessarily, that in and of itself is not necessarily bad for you. It's probably just wretched tasting drink.
Well, alcohol in general in excess is not good for you, Nick. So I'm guessing the bathtub kind isn't all that much better if you're doing it in large quantities, which I don't promote the idea, but I think it should be a personal choice like it is in most parts of the country. If someone wants to booze themselves to death, friends and neighbors should offer help and support, but if they don't want it, they're ultimately going to do it. And I don't think that it's the government's job, whether it be on the federal, state, or local level, to say, no, you have a drinking problem, so we're going to ban it from the entire town because there's too many people here who just can't handle it.
The other point is it's just not, it's just, as you were saying, it's just not effective. I mean, not only are you punishing some people for problems that a handful of people or a smaller percentage of people might experience, but you're also putting in place a policy that's not going to stop the people with a drinking problem. They're already making what sounds like a pretty foul homebrew. It's not even really beer or wine per se. It's just like a step up from prison hooch. And in one of these stories, they point out how the guy had 7 pounds of yeast. Ooh. So I think he was going to make a lot.
If someone's going to destroy their lives drinking this alcohol, I say at least let them enjoy the alcohol they're drinking, Nick. Rather
don't
than
make them ferment it, and
right. At least allow it to be enjoyable. Let them go out and get some quality control.
Juicy juice and yeast you get.
It's just a shame. It's a shame when you have people who want to control the lives of other people because morally they know what's best. And if other people just were teetotalers like them, or I guess here in New Hampshire and most of the other parts of the U.S., if they only stuck to alcohol. I mean, it's very strange how in one part of the country you'd be well off if you just didn't drink any alcohol at all. And in another part of the country, well, if you have this drug, it's okay. Alcohol, that drug, it's okay. But if you want to do something like marijuana, then you're a bad person.
Well, the funny thing about this story, it's funny that you point that out because I believe Alaska has...
Marijuana is decriminalized?
I think they decriminalize home possession up to 4 ounces, which
is a significant amount.
And I think you can grow a number of plants at home too, just not for medical, just because you want to smoke pot. Because again, it's Alaska, and I don't think there's a whole lot else to do in the wintertime. I don't know how many viewers. I don't know if we have any viewers.
I guess
in
it
Alaska.
depends what part of Alaska you're in.
In Anchorage, I'm sure you got stuff to do.
Sure, but
much
you know
outside
what?
of Anchorage, I don't think there's a whole hell. There's not much to do.
It's funny.
It's
so subjective, though. It's so subjective what people say is good or bad. Alcohol bad, pot good. You know what? Everything's bad in excess, and there's some drugs that are bad in even small quantities. But those are individual choices that individuals should make. No victim, no crime. That's what I keep on saying, and I don't want to pay to put someone behind bars, and I don't want to pay the police to go and look for yeast. Well, I guess I'm not, because that's probably a local law, and the local residents get to pay the police to snoop around for yeast. But you get the point. I don't care what it is. I don't care if you want to eat yourself to death on hamburgers, or kill yourself by drinking in excess, or kill yourself by using other harmful drugs and substances, or if you just want to go to Walgreens and buy a bottle of bleach. I really suggest against the idea, but I don't think you should get arrested for it.
Yeah, and this isn't just something that pertains to yeast. It also pertains, as we were mentioning, to other substances here. A lot of them arguably less harmful than alcohol. Remember, we're kind of debating this. Certainly, any kind of drug use can cause harm. And I certainly wouldn't recommend it. However, that doesn't mean that everybody who uses illicit drugs has a drug problem. It also doesn't.
Most don't.
It also, most do not have a drug problem. It also does not mean that just because a drug is illegal, it's actually more harmful. Conversely, it doesn't mean that because something's legal, you should do it. If you consume enough caffeine, you will die. And yes, you can buy pure powdered caffeine. It's quite a trip. It also kills you. I really, really wouldn't recommend it. But here's a story coming out of Missouri where Jimmy Thibault, I guess he's a singer in the jam band. It's a Grateful Dead cover band. He also owns a campground, 350-acre campground. Sounds quite nice, out in the Ozarks. Well, he's been hosting these music festivals every year where his band and other bands like them get together and they jam. And people come and they go to these concerts and they listen to jam band music. And what do you think happens at jam band concerts, Toby?
Well, I'm sure everybody adheres to the laws because drugs are illegal, and that has done away with drug use, right?
No, apparently a lot of them are using mind-rattling drugs.
Oh, no.
So,
the government should get involved.
The government did get involved. And now the federal government is going after Jimmy Thibault, suing him. I think they're going after $200,000 and his property, which is 350 acres. Here's what he did wrong. He didn't sell drugs. There's no evidence he was connected to drug sales at the concerts at all. It's just, according to the story here, people were selling different kinds of drugs at his concerts. There were quite a few people selling drugs at the concert. Imagine that, Toby.
Oh,
people
no.
at a concert, and a jam band concert of all places, selling drugs. Now, honestly, if these laws were enforced consistently, where they said that venue owners are responsible if drugs get sold at the venue, if these kinds of statutes were enforced across the board, there would just not be concerts. I can tell you I've been to a lot of concerts. The one constant is that you will always catch the smell of marijuana. And that's an easy drug to detect because it's got a very particular smell, and the smell carries a long way. I'm sure at pretty much every one of those concerts I've been to, somebody's been on cocaine or something else, ecstasy, I don't know.
I'm pretty sure.
Morphine, I don't know, whatever.
There's definitely a high correlation between concert goers and drug use experimentation.
Not everybody at the concert is using drugs, but a lot of people
apparently
at concerts
it's his job to get off the stage and start policing the people at his concert. Now, this is how silly the war on drugs gets. Let's just take this a step further. What if you said wherever there is land, the owner of the land is responsible for anything that's being sold there, including drugs, which are prohibited? A lot of drugs are sold on public property. In the local park, for instance, even here in small, quaint little Keene, New Hampshire, I've noticed a few drug deals myself. Who's responsible there? Does the city seize the land from themselves? If so, who gets the land? After all, they weren't properly policing, and I saw open drug sales taking place. Really, it's ridiculous.
Did they build a
silly.
skate park just so that kids could sell drugs there? That's why they build those things, right? Because that's what happens at the skate park.
Well, kids are going to experiment, especially when authorities tell them no, and they put them through DARE classes.
I still don't understand why cities built skate parks. Is it so people have? Well, I think it's so that corral them.
It has them go into one place so that they don't go and vandalize stuff. And some of them actually do skate and have fun. It's not all punks that hang out there. Yes, they congregate and they get a little bit punky, but they do that in the library next door too. They just like to congregate places. This is what kids do. They don't have jobs. That's what I think they should be doing. That's what I did when as soon as I was legal, I officially got my job, but I was working much before that under the table. I think it's important to get a work ethic. Then again, hanging out at the skate parks can be fun too, but I think this should be left up to the parents, not to the cities and stuff. You take care of your kids. They're at the skate park. Why are they at the skate park?
I still don't get why the taxpayers
frisk them when they get home.
I still don't get why the taxpayers have to pay for a place where kids can sell drugs.
So that they don't go and break into your house and spray paint your car and stuff.
They're going to do that anyway.
Not if they're all at the skate park. They'll go and spray paint.
Do you remember that vandalism ring that went around Keene with the Z gear a few years ago?
Yes,
it started at the skate park. Yeah.
But most of it stayed there, luckily. Most of it. Unfortunately, it feeds out all the time. I got my whole street was egged last week. Luckily, at first I went outside. I was like, oh no, I've been egged. Someone saw the show and hated it, and they egged the whole street. So it wasn't just me. It made me feel a little bit better. But I'd rather them go and vandalize their own skate park than come and vandalize my house. I guarantee it was teenagers.
Skate parks. I was just making the point.
Well, I'm just saying, I guarantee it was teenagers who did the egging down my whole street. Not guarantee, 99% sure, because that's one of the things teens do, and I'd rather they just go to their skate park and do it down there.
Well, if it's somebody who's in their 20s doing that, what are you doing? You missed the boat. How old are you? How old are you? I don't even know if you should get arrested, but
you should be slapped.
You should be put in the stocks or something, and made to hold a sign that said, I egged the house at such and such years old. If you're 16, you've got an excuse. Naughty, go on your way. Yes, I'm not saying do it, but
they're gonna.
I understand why it would happen if you're 15, 16. 25, people do that. Grow up.
Some kind of a mental problem.
Friggin' job.
But on to the point, Nick.
Shouldn't you be paying a mortgage or
something? The point here is the war on drugs is silly. That's the whole point. That's what we got involved in the skate park. And if this dangerous precedent of the feds trying to seize this man's land and fine him $200,000 because drugs were being sold on his land during concerts that he had, wow, that is a slippery slope to get on. And it just points and paints the picture of how silly the war on drugs is in general. We're not going to go into the whole discussion now. We've done many hours, dozens and dozens and dozens of hours, entire episodes dedicated to the war on drugs and how it's a failed policy and how it really creates more harm than good, how it ruins lives. So go into the archives, check some of those out. Or if you're a drug warrior out there who really thinks this is a good idea, check out Law Enforcement Against Prohibition at leap.cc. I'd suggest them. There's thousands of ex-cops, judges, prosecutors out there that really believed in the war on drugs and thought that they could win it. And then they've realized all the lives they ruined, the harm they did, and many of them have changed their minds. So I'd say check out leap.cc if you need more on the figuring this system out and finding a true fix to drug use and abuse and treating it like a medical problem, a social disorder, rather than crimes and criminals and locking people up and seizing their land and fighting a war on the people. Guess what? You know someone, your friend, your neighbor, your kid, your dad, your wife, someone very close to you has a drug problem. They won't tell you about it because you're a judger.
And in prohibition, it's just more likely to create a situation where they're going to get killed in a bad drug deal or killed by tainted drugs, or more
put in jail,
or more likely to be exposed to people who are selling harder drugs. I mean, your teenager who's going through a rebellious phase and smoking marijuana.
His drug dealer also sells cocaine and heroin.
And he's not checking IDs, and he's not particularly scrupulous. I mean, so this is what the war on drugs leads to. The reason we have things like crack cocaine, or like these legal alternatives that are coming out, bath salts,
legal weed,
which are both in just terrible ideas in my opinion.
The guy who created legal weed like 15 years ago, he was some crazy scientist professor. He said this should not be done. People should stick to regular marijuana. It's much safer.
Right. Well,
but
because
marijuana is illegal.
Chemicals that have never been tested on humans before. And bath salts, I mean, based on the stories I've heard about them, there's no way that you can tell me that they don't do serious harm. I mean, people do die, and they screw you up in other ways too. These alternatives exist. They're available over the counter to young people, and your kids would be a lot better off smoking weed. To be perfectly honest, I mean, and these things are getting popular. They'll ban those eventually. They've done that in some states.
But another one will pop up.
Right. I mean, what are you going to do?
And the problem is because they're legal, kids' morality is all screwed up because of their schooling and the government. It's legal, it must be safe, and it's absolutely not true.
Right, I mean,
absolutely not true. The federal government stance, which we talked about recently because it just came out,
federal government stance,
they just, again, in today's day and age, in 2011, the federal government just said that marijuana is just as dangerous as heroin. So let's not go believing what the government says because they're full of crap. Teach your kids, do your research yourself. Don't trust the government to do it for you, or your kid's going to be strung out on bath salts, and they're going to have a serious problem. So I'd say, be a parent. Don't let the government do it for you. Right?
Yeah. I would agree because I've seen these things come up relatively quickly, and I'm not terribly surprised but I'm a little alarmed at just how quickly people jump onto something because
it's legal.
Well, I mean, it's just because it's new. They don't want to get arrested. I get it's cheaper.
Yep.
It's way cheaper.
There's no black market.
I think the price has a lot more to do than but I don't know how much staying power those have anyway. I mean, I don't think they'll ever displace, even if they're not made illegal. I can't imagine they'll ever really seriously displace things like marijuana and cocaine. But I think people need to use their common sense here because. The government can make those illegal, and then people are going to do more stupid. People huff gasoline fumes and Freon to get high. Those air dusters, they'll get you high. People also commit suicide that way too.
Yeah,
displace the air in your lungs with nasty chemicals.
There's a reason the hobby shop sells the red airplane glue behind the counter, because that's what the kids are doing these days.
Well, kids have done glue for a long time, but I mean,
not good for you.
But I mean, people will just huff straight up poison fumes to get high, and we think that
since the dawn of humans,
does this not tell us that maybe we're not able to address this through legislation?
Well, you can't ever, because since since humans created communities and started leaving behind things like pots, like old pottery and stuff, since they came together, there's also evidence along that with substances that will alter the mind, such as whether it's alcohol or marijuana or hallucinogens. Throughout human existence, a certain percent of humans have wanted to alter their consciousness, since we can find traces of civilization. Any trace of human civilization, the oldest ones, going back, there's also traces of drug abuse or use. I guess you can't, well, it's difficult to say what they were abusing it. But there's definitely, some would say any at all is abusing it. There's definitely evidence since human civilization that certain members of each society want to experiment or alter their consciousness. And no amount of legislation is going to change that. It's just not. So all you drug warriors should think about how to prevent harm. Harm reduction. Look into Google harm reduction, Google law enforcement against prohibition. Google war on drugs. I bet you'll find more negative about it than positive. Anyway, so we do need to move on. Another negative thing that's happening in this country is the TSA. Keeping us safe? I don't think so. They're just sexually harassing people. I'm sorry, if you think that the TSA out there are really keeping you safe from terrorists blowing up airplanes, well, I've got a bridge to sell you. It's worth a lot of money, and I'll give you the deed myself. Any price, starting at $1. Email me when you're done watching the show. It's very good. But anyways, let's get into what's going on in the TSA. People are getting fed up with it. Now, while about half of the population, half of you watching this out there, agree that it's a good idea to have a naked picture taken of you or get molested by the TSA before getting on an airplane. After all, there's bad people out there, right? They could kill us. I bet a smaller percentage of you, but still a percentage, would agree to house-to-house searches to make sure that there's not bad people hiding next door to you as well. But I'm not going to get through to you people. I am going to get through to some people who are just frustrated, though. And this is one story to just point out one 61-year-old woman's frustrations. Earlier this week, a Colorado woman is accused of putting her hands on a TSA agent at the Sky Harbor International Airport in Phoenix. Court records show that the 61-year-old Yuki, I'm not going to get her name right, so I'm not going to try, grabbed the left breast of a female agent Thursday at Terminal 4 checkpoint. Police say she squeezed and twisted the agent's breast with both hands. Let's see, she has been charged with sexual abuse, and she was released, and she went back to her home in Colorado pending a court appearance. Now, what do you think happened? And I don't know this for a fact, but it's using my thought skills, my guessing skills. What do you think happened before she touched the TSA agent's breast, Nick?
I'm guessing maybe one of the TSA agents touched her breast.
Now, was the TSA agent charged with sexual abuse?
No, because they get to do that sexually abusing people thing. Just that's their job. They get paid for it, in fact.
Oh, well, they don't like it when the shoe's on the other foot now, do they? Yes, no one should. It's a bad thing to just let people come up and start groping you.
Especially people you
well, at least you want to. I guess that's your
badge.
issue.
You know, these guys...
Oh, you were arguing on the TV show that they're metal now.
No, I think some of them
I mean, on the radio show.
But yeah, they get these crappy uniforms and whatnot because you're not real police. They're just glorified mall cops.
Mall cops
or like
are much
those
better.
cops they have at the county fair.
At least mall cops bust shoplifters.
And I think they have a lot of pent-up aggression that they need to let out through these searches.
Yeah.
I don't think I think these are the people who should have
sexual deviants.
I think, well, I don't know about that, but...
Oh, yeah, but there's definitely a percentage of them.
Right, but
when they're molesting people all day long.
These are the people who should not have any power over their fellow citizens.
No.
These are not the people that you want.
But
you put people, it's corrupting to be in that position in the first place. But these are really not. You're not selecting from the best pool to begin with.
I don't think it's their fault. You've got a government program in place offering deviants this job. Yeah, there's some pretty nice benefits as well. So yeah, why wouldn't they take it? They get to feel important and powerful, touch some breasts every now and then, grope someone under their pants, look at naked pictures of them, feel all important by ordering people. Have you ever met a nice TSA agent? I haven't. They're always yelling. Angry folk. But they probably get a kick off it, so I don't blame them, though. It's the government that's put the program, and it's all half of you, I guess, not all of you, half of you out there that say, yes, anything to keep us safe from those scary people. The government says they're scary, so I'm going to believe them. They're not really, they're scary people, but taking naked pictures of yourself isn't going to protect you on there. If I really need to argue that point, I've lost you already, so I'll just move along and say they're not so scary. This is security theater. This is not anything to keep people safe.
No, I think that's how it's justified, but I don't think the effects can really be demonstrated. And I mean, I know a lot of people just don't consider this a big deal. I mean, a lot of people do. But, I mean, I feel like...
Well, a lot of people say anything for safety. That's what the courts have said.
Anything for safety, but, I mean, I think maybe it's just... Maybe we're not as private, because it seems like a big deal to me.
Well, it was a big deal when it first came out.
Well, yeah.
A lot of people were very upset at first. Yeah. Back in, what was it, October, November, when the naked picture machines first hit the market, and the gropings and the under the pants first happened, people got up in arms about it, but then they said, well, I'm not going to do anything about it. The few people who did do something about it were threatened with jail time and tens of thousands of dollars with fines. So the people backed down. I can't really blame a lot of them. It's not the hill to die on. And I think people were upset, but then it just becomes more.
No, it would be a reasonable hill. It's not mine, but I think it's a reasonable position to take. That is your position.
Yeah, well,
where is your hill to that? The checkpoints? Or, I mean, like I said, certainly not mine, but do they have to just have checkpoints where they fill up your crotch on the road when you get to work? Like,
well, I mean, in certain places, yeah, they do. They do that. There's checkpoints that you have to submit to search if they ask you. Definitely an ID if they ask you. Right in Washington, D.C., the home of the freest country in the world, there are the checkpoints to go see national monuments. So
well, there's checkpoints just to get in and out of some neighborhoods. I remember we covered that story a couple of years ago.
And it's
actually
definitely
just walling off some blocks. And
it's more prevalent down by the border in Mexico, but there's checkpoints up here, even in New Hampshire, coming down from parts of Canada. They got to check you for immigrants and drugs. So I mean, this is the police state on terrorists,
all of those illegal Canadians coming in.
And the terrorists, Nick, and the terrorists. They got to keep us safe from the terrorists. I mean, it's just not worth it. Oh, we're running out of time, so I got to get to this last story real quick here, Nick. Did plug it, so people are very wondering, right? Well, it has to do with copyright law. I'm just going to give you the gist of it and let you think about it, mull it over. Frank Bishop knew his name was a little provocative, but it stuck. Friends ragged on him. Customers chuckled as they walked into his pawn shop. When a TV show came on with the almost identical name, Bishop felt vindicated. Once the name was on television, friends thought it was cool. But it wasn't as cool when a package arrived with a notice of infringement. The cease and desist letter came from New York law firm representing A&E Television Network's Pawn Stars, the 2-year-old reality series featuring gold and silver pawn shop on the Las Vegas outskirts. Recently, Bishop's Facebook page for his pawn shop, Pawn Star, his name without the S, has caused some confusion for some customers, the letter states, visiting the Facebook page. Now, Pawn Stars has this thing that they like to call a national trademark, which means no one in the United States can bear the same name, despite the fact that Mr. Bishop opened his shop a few years before Pawn Stars ever came out as a TV show. Back in February of 2006, Pawn Stars didn't register their trademark until July 2009, but he's still worried because he doesn't have a national trademark. Neither do hundreds of other pawn shops across the nation with the same name. I just think, so who knows what will happen. Maybe he'll have to go to court. Maybe he'll sell the name to Pawn Stars. Who knows? But the point is, this nation's copyrights and intellectual property laws are screwed up, Nick. That's it. We'll be back next time. Email us. Everything is on our website if you want to contact us, freemindstv.com. Until next week, have a good night.